I believe I know some of the real, raw facts about the hidden evidence. Each may be a piece to the puzzle. Yes, the facts, or alleged facts, are incredible. By human standards, maybe even ridiculous. For certain, they are rooted in a legend that nags research even today and looms as myth to the rest of the world. And, so, it all began as a rumor, a terse, unembellished rumor about a saucer and its crew of little men on ice at Wright-Patterson. But the notion was so improbable, it became funny. To make it funnier, some said the little critters were even green. Even research thought it was far out, so much so that it was simply unfashionable for anyone respectable in its ranks to even soberly talk about the possibility, alone go on record to write about it. Everyone, who had done their research spadework, remembered Frank Scully, who in the early 1950s wrote a book about a saucer crash in 1948 in Aztec, New Mexico. The book, using some allegedly shady characters, was declared a hoax and Scully was axed into disgrace. But, the Aztec story did not die, and over the long years, new rumors about other crashes emerged. According to witnesses untraceable, UFOs have crash-landed, or, as one source avers, have even been shot down by Air Force interceptors and retrieved under the highest degree of secrecy. I decided to dig into the rumors. In my book, Situation Red, The UFO Siege, Doubleday, 1977, I made light mention of the UFO crash/retrieval subject, and to my surprise, my first live source surfaced to tell his story. A pilot in the military reserves, he seemed sincere, had no axe to grind or money to gain, and he preferred anonymity. My new first-person report, and others, mostly second-hand, were included in my first paper, Retrievals of the Third Kind, which I presented as speaker at the 9th Annual MUFON Symposium in Dayton, Ohio, July, 1978. Surprisingly, my proposed paper got unusual publicity. A story released through Upwires was picked up by ABC Radio nationwide and into Canada. Just as surprisingly, after my talk, dead silence. When I checked with ABC in New York, I was told they were more interested in Pete Rose of the Cincinnati Reds, who was trying to break a hitting record. Fortunately, however, what had been aired earlier was sufficient to open the proverbial floodgates. Emerging were more incredible data from new, independent, and credible first-person sources, each offering a substantive clue about a military retrieval operation, or information about his observation of the craft or preserved alien cadavers. All, fearful of reprisal and or wanting no invasion of privacy, insisted on anonymity. For most of my informants, during this climactic period, was a medical doctor, on staff of a major medical center, who alleged by letter to me, unsigned by prearrangement, that he performed an autopsy on an alien being in the early 1950s, another, through an intermediary, was a CIA employee who guardedly provided some useful data in response to my questions, and, advisedly, some do's and don'ts for me to use as a guide. Convinced that my pursuit into the UFO crash/retrieval subject was substantive, and despite the realization that I invited criticism for hearsay by not revealing the identities of my sources, I released for publication my second paper through MUFON, The UFO Crash/Retrieval Syndrome, Status Report 2, January, 1980. My persistent probes into this strange and sensitive realm since 1980 have produced some surprisingly sobering information, and expectedly, some unpleasant rise and frustration. The latter, caused mainly by a series of rapid setbacks in the flow of information, first became apparent at some point in time during the late summer of 1980, when some of my key first-person informants, who had allegedly seen either the alien craft or the cadavers, became mysteriously unreachable by any means of communication. By the end of October of that year, after repeated and futile probes to reach these sources, I felt convinced that my pipelines had been deliberately cut. Also in this time frame, Coincidentally, my two key respondents, one medical, and the other the CIA employee, admitted they could no longer relate information to me. Implied was a tightening of security. Both would know, as both were still active in secret UFO projects. Even some news sources, through intermediaries, who had promised information in person or by mail, faded into sudden oblivion. As the erosive draft of information on this subject continued through 1981, the negative noise of critics and rumor-mongers grew louder as they belittled my work, or attacked my credibility. Feeling neutralized, I decided to withdraw into silence and to watch and wait. Perhaps, I reasoned, there might be just one interloper to break through the web, or maybe there would be a signal, for good or bad. Nothing. Unlike the two previous productive years when I gathered information and published 2 monographs, with only minor interference, most of my efforts in 1981 resulted in disappointment. Aborted was my plan to publish my 3rd paper slated for that year. Suddenly, starting in September 1981, the long silence was broken. As though somebody pressed a button to on, new sources emerged, 8 in fact, all in short order of each other. Encouraged by the sudden influx of new contacts, I negotiated with each for the next move. As before, I promised anonymity, and then I waited. 3 promptly became good first-person reports, the others, however, faltered, and in time, like Cheshire cats, one by one faded away. Soon realizing that the upsurge was not the beginning of a boom, I reclined again to reevaluate my position and the amassing material on hand and decided to start writing Status Report 3 without delay. During this period of resurgence, fortuitously, news came from an unexpected source. A new letter surfaced from Barry Goldwater, Senator, Arizona. Underscoring his apparent distaste for UFO secrecy, it came in response to a letter sent by researcher Lee Graham, of Aerojet Electric Systems, Azusa, California, who had written to him before without answers. As reminders this time, Graham had enclosed copies of 3 previously published letters, appearing in Status Report 2, all of which told of an Air Force denial to grant him access to a room at Wright-Patterson, storing UFO secrets. Significantly, in this letter, dated October 19, 1981, quoted below, Goldwater went a step further, making reference to the secret storage facility as the Blue Room. First, let me tell you that I have long since given up acquiring access to the so-called Blue Room at Wright-Patterson, as I have had one long string of denials from chief after chief, so I have given up. In answer to your questions, one is essentially correct. I don't know of anyone who has access to the Blue Room, nor am I aware of its contents, and I am not aware of anything having been relocated. I can't answer your question 6, in fact, I can't find anyone who would answer it. To tell you the truth, Mr. Graham, this thing has gotten so highly classified, even though I will admit there is a lot of it that has been released, it is just impossible to get anything on it. I am returning your papers because I know they are of value to you. Goldwater's reference to a Blue Room at Wright-Patterson suggests a more in-depth operation concealed behind the small front office of Project Blue Book. Curiously, the color blue brings to mind the Blue Berets, see Case A3, Status Report 2, and Blue Boys, described in Case A9 of this paper. The witness model. The first-person witness, in crash/retrieval research, may suddenly surface from out of anywhere, USA. Such a person, if his credentials are good, plays a crucial role, for what he or she tells may provide a clue, or a corroborative link, to lend credibility to the greatest story ever, never told. First-person witnesses are rare, and even rarer are those allowing use of their identities. It seems there are risks in talking too much. They stress it, I sense it. When they talk for the first time I note every word carefully. There may be no second chance. Also noted is the witness's concern for matters of personal security. Usually, in the same breath, assurances are requested for anonymity and measures to prevent the invasion of privacy. Simple requests, indeed, and I have honored them even at the expense of my own repertorial credibility. And, interestingly, in most instances, witnesses are not ufologists, curious, yes, but they do not want to be involved in the crossfire of the skeptical media or undisciplined researchers. Paramount to the objectives of research, and to me on its behalf, is to establish credibility for the witness. Is the witness sincere? Is his report accurate? And, if perchance, one or two are not, what of the others? Or, we may ask, are all reports perpetrated by hoaxers, the mentally sick, or by cells of manipulators peddling a package of disinformation? Investigation, even with adequate funds, cannot provide a ready answer. On this premise, I suppose, we could challenge the veracity of any or all UFO reports in reputable research files, some of which are far more outlandish than a crash-landed UFO. Sometimes in research one can learn more about the sincerity of a person, who claims to know a secret, by what is unsaid. His or her true fidelity may reveal itself through body chemistry, a dart of an eye, the twist of a smile, a play of the hand, or the repetitive use of to emphasize a point. But, as it is my work, the person with sensitive information is not always personally available for an eyeball-to-eyeball evaluation. Most, for reasons of security, usually prefer the shield of an intermediary. Safe and pivotal, this go-between feels fewer pressures and knows that he does not have to identify his source and can stop the dialogue at any time if the conditions of his source are not met. In this instance, I have only second-hand chemistry, and, if the approach is made by phone, which is the way it usually is in research, then I have only a voice and its intonations. However, most intermediaries reaching me, essentially pass the on-site or telephone tests, and most, in short time, if the conditions are right, will provide credentials for themselves and often their sources. While much can be debated about witness integrity, the model by which it is presented for public review can also be debated. In this matter, I have had all degrees of criticism from pockets of research. There is no argument against constructive criticism. I favor it, but, hurrah to the day when this subject can be fully aired, or when the Pied Piper can lead every witness to the point of signing an affidavit or appear on TV without a stocking stretched over his face. But, as one insider told me, even those steps would not be proof. To help clarify my position, Dr. Peter Rank, Chief of the Department of Radiology, Methodist Hospital, Mady, Zion, Wisconsin, who had heard all the complaints, explains his views in a letter published in the MUFO and UFO Journal, March, 1982, as follows. I would like to comment on the reliability of information and method of presentation surrounding the paper, The UFO Crash/Retrieval Syndrome, made public by Leonard Stringfield, January, 1980. There has been some controversy about the reliability of Stringfield's data, with special reference to his reluctance to go public with the names of his witnesses and informants. His failure to identify the sources of information has been used to cause some doubt upon the reliability of his data. This seems to be unfair. Perhaps the following explanation will help. For a generation now, ufologists have been unconsciously assuming that the journalistic model of reporting is the one which demands the most credence. Information published in the media demands that such stories reveal the who, what, where, when, and why of the incident reported. It is assumed that such complete disclosure lends authenticity to the story involved, and indeed is a requirement for believability. Most ufologists have adhered to this principle whenever possible. Such full disclosure, according to the journalistic model, has been counterproductive. In many cases, foreknowledge that their names would be published in the popular media has driven away UFO witnesses, and certainly has driven away any informants who cared to comment anonymously about the crash/retrieval syndrome. It should now be clear to all dedicated ufologists more than a generation after Kenneth Arnold's sighting, that a different manner of reporting UFO information than the journalistic model is required. Perhaps another alternative should be adopted, specifically the medical model of reporting scientific information, and do so in accordance with case history technique. Medical literature frequently has need of describing objective and very personal information about patients. The literature is replete with such case histories. In all cases, the patient's anonymity is respected and the patient identified only by initials. These case histories are never challenged on the grounds that the patient's full name is not disclosed, and the underlying integrity of reporting is assumed as a matter of fact.